Hello, this is Chris and Eli. I'm Eli, that's Chris from Landlord Gurus. And we have done episodes on each of the steps of filling a vacancy. And at this point, we're going to cover the point at which you actually hand over the unit to a new tenant. You've signed a lease, or you've at least agreed upon the lease terms, and you're at that point where they're going to take occupancy. So first off, you have to deal with actually signing the lease. So Chris, do you do physical signing or electronic? And at what point do you do that?
No, I do all electronic at this point, and I will usually do it once we've agreed upon terms. And sometimes that's several days in advance of move-in, or sometimes the day of. But yeah, I do all electronic. It's just quicker and easier, and you don't have to print stuff out.
Yeah, I do the same, usually a few days ahead of time. I used to go and walk through the lease page by page with tenants, but we write about easy landlord forms and Avail and Turbo Tenant, and they all provide 50 state specific lease documentation that can be populated, filled out straight from the application, and then sent off for signing. The documents that aren't included on those platforms, and I'm using Avail, I will create offline and then upload for signing via DocuSign. So you can do it that way as well. So you use a similar product to DocuSign,
Use
right?
a similar product, yes, and you upload your forms and determine who's signing what part, and then it automatically sends that off, and it creates a secure, reliable signing process that is enforceable and
Legally binding. Yeah. And if you get to the point where you are going to hand over the unit and you haven't yet signed a lease and collected a deposit, then make sure that once you've agreed on those terms, and basically everybody has agreed that this is going to be the new tenant and that they're committing to all your terms, use a form that documents the intention to rent and collects a deposit that ensures that they're going to follow through on that and not leave you high and dry on the day of.
Exactly. That's a great point. Yeah. If you agree to have someone move in and you don't sign it right off the bat, then yeah, it's to ensure that they are going to, so you can take the unit off your listing and not have to keep showing.
Or have to start all over again if somebody leaves you high and dry,
Exactly.
leaving you unpaid for rent for potentially another month. Okay, so you have either pre-signed or are signing on the day of the lease documents. That makes everything all official. Equally important is to collect any money that you haven't already collected. Again, using property management software. I use Avail, there's Pay Rent. All these companies we're talking about are leaders in the field, and they're also partners of ours. So, full disclosure on that. I initiate all of that beforehand, and we'll deal with the collecting money, and particularly collecting money electronically in another episode. But if you get your check or your money order, we recommend against cash. So you're made whole, before they're getting to take occupancy. Are you doing all your payments electronically, Chris?
No, and especially for those upfront ones, and I think particularly if there's a short period of time between when we've agreed upon the terms and conditions and when they actually move in, and there may not be time to set up the online payment process yet. So in a lot of circumstances, it's still that first, that initial payment when we meet them and hand over the keys for the deposit and first month rent is often in the form of a check or in the form of a money order, which is more and more the case these days, as a lot of our younger tenants don't seem to have checking accounts.
And it's more secure. That means that money is there. They can't bounce.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay, so you've got signed documents and you have money. So the next step is to do kind of an overview walkthrough with the new tenant, getting them familiar with the property, the building, their particular unit, enforcing important things like use the fans when you're cooking or showering, because that means that you're not getting mildew in the unit that's avoidable.
Exactly. Anything like that, that they're not accustomed to or haven't dealt with before, don't put eggshells down the garbage disposal, things like that. Or if there's just anything unusual, this front door maybe is a little sticky, so if you want to lock it, make sure you push it in a little bit more. I don't know. It could be anything like as simple as that, to telling them where they need to park their bikes, or where their parking spot is, or where the garbage goes, and how that gets handled, things like that.
How the laundry room operates and kind of what the protocol is.
Exactly. And I think that you end up with a lot of things you take for granted, and you think, well, everybody should know that. But in a lot of cases, they don't. It might be their first time living alone, or their first time in an apartment like this. So it's new to a lot of people. And so it does require just going over sometimes the basics.
Yeah. And it avoids a lot of hassles down the road where a problem has already happened. And then you've got to go backwards and say, oh, well, no, you have to do it this way. So
right. Yeah.
Okay, so you've gone through the building, through the property. The next step is property condition report, which in, I think, most locations is required now to go along with the lease. And that is a document that formalizes the agreement between the landlord and the tenant of the condition of the unit that they're taking over. So
even if it's not required, I would still recommend you do it.
for sure.
Yeah. Document it so when they move out, everybody knows who's responsible for the damages if there have been any.
Right. And that's precisely what you put on that document up front is, oh, okay, well, there's a dent in the wall here. Or a good example for me is when I'm leasing a unit that doesn't yet need a full paint job, but there are a couple things that are left over from the last tenant that don't warrant a full paint job. But, it's an anchor that goes into the wall or a hole that's been touched up, but doesn't look perfect. So the tenant shouldn't have to pay for that down the road. It's good for everybody. And they know they're not going to have to pay for an existing problem. And if they create a problem, it's documented that it wasn't there when they moved in. So it's an agreement on what the condition is.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think photos and video are a great way to go about it. I think the best practices, Chris and I were just talking about this, is to actually take the form yourself ahead of time and fill out everything that you see that's an issue, and take photos and or video ahead of time, possibly send that to the tenant ahead of time electronically, so that when you meet them there, they can go through and look at the section that addresses the bedroom and say, okay, yeah, I see that they've marked the nail holes here, or the blind that's a little sticky, and that it's not a whole process of them having to examine everything while you're standing there twiddling your thumbs.
And I think the documentation with photos and videos is a great point. You can, even if you're using property management software, you've probably got some file storage capabilities. So you can just upload all of that there, and it's there for the tenant to see, and it's there at the end of the terms of their lease. Then you can refer back to those photos and videos as well, and it's on the same storage location.
Yeah, and easy to get to.
And a lot of them have property condition report templates that you can use. There's others like Easy Landlord Forms where we'll put the links to all this stuff in the description, but you can go there and download their sample property condition report as well. It'll usually have, the name of the tenant, the address of the property, and then sections like Eli was talking about, the bedroom or the living room, bathroom, kitchen, and different features within each of the rooms that you can then examine and give a rating, good, fair, or things like that.
And any notes.
Yes.
Okay, once you're done with that, then both parties sign it. It's official. It's part of the lease. Like you said, Chris, that it's a great idea to have a spot where all that gets uploaded. It's easy for everybody to find and refer to. You can hold people responsible when you can show that they have had access to it. So you're pretty well done with the process. And at that point, it's just time to hand over the keys, or in my case, codes. I put punch pad door locks, usually the deadbolts, and I'll ask them if they have a code that they like, something they use for other things and that they can remember.
Right.
And then I'll take all the previous codes out of that lock so that nobody prior can then access the unit, and I'll put their new code in. And that's the way I do it. Sometimes I do the programming ahead of time if I'm there, and especially if I'm already there ahead of time filling out the condition report. That's all done. And you can get in and out and have everybody spend a minimal amount of time doing the process. But you have keys.
We still use keys for most of the units. I think there's one of the electronic code, but with the keys, just hand over the keys. Sometimes there's 2 keys, and they can pass on a set to a friend or someone who can hang on to an extra, the spare key in case they get locked out, which happened to me recently. Somebody got locked out and didn't have a spare. But I will often give them the keys. If there's not already a spare, I will tell them they ought to go make a spare and give it to someone they trust, and inform them if they do get locked out and I have to come let them in, there might be a fee, or definitely be a fee if that's all locked.
Yeah, that goes in the lease, and it's something to pay attention to. I make no promises about being as accessible at any point.
That's fair, and especially if you have property that's not located in the same place where you're living.
Yeah. Sure. All right, I think we're done with this portion of the process, so we'll sign off here, and we'll come back again and address electronic rent and collection. So thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share with others, and come back for the next one. This is Chris and Eli with Landlord Gurus, and thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.